Have you ever been in a situation where you found $50 in an old jacket pocket and you felt, pretty good about it? Maybe a little rush, pleasant surprise. Now imagine the exact opposite. You reach for your wallet and realize you've lost $50. It fell out somewhere. Which feeling is stronger? Which one are you still thinking about at the end of the day? Welcome to Mind Decoded. I'm Dr. Ann.
And I'm Zach. Dr. Ann, I already know where this is going because I have lived both of those scenarios. And the $50 lost, that haunts me. I think about it for days. The $50 found, I'm happy for about 45 minutes and then I've completely forgotten about it. So, what is that? Am I just wired to be more negative?
Great question. And the answer is kind of amazing. You are not more negative. You are wired exactly the way every human brain is wired. What you just described is one of the most well-documented phenomena in behavioral economics and cognitive psychology. It's called loss aversion, and it was discovered and rigorously studied by two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, starting in the 1970s. Their work on this eventually won Kahneman the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002.
Wait, a psychologist won the Nobel Prize in economics for studying why losing feels worse than winning? That alone is fascinating.
It really is, and it's because their work fundamentally changed how we understand human decision making. Before Kahneman and Tversky, the dominant model in economics was that humans are rational actors, that we weigh options logically, that losing $50 and gaining $50 should be, emotionally speaking, mirror images of each other, equal and opposite. But Kahneman and Tversky showed something completely different. They showed that for the vast majority of people, the pain of losing is approximately twice as powerful, psychologically speaking, as the pleasure of gaining the same amount.
Twice as powerful? So losing $100 feels as bad as gaining $200 feels good? That's not balanced at all.
Exactly right. That's the asymmetry at the heart of loss aversion. And Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated this through a series of elegant experiments. In one classic version, they gave people a choice between two gambles. Option A was a sure gain of $40. Option B was an 80% chance to gain $100 and a 20% chance to gain nothing. Now, the expected value of both options is the same, $40, but most people chose option A, the sure gain. They preferred the certainty. Then the researchers flipped the framing. They gave people a choice between a sure loss of $40 and an 80% chance to lose $100 with a 20% chance to lose nothing. Again, mathematically identical. But this time, most people chose the gamble. They preferred to take the risk rather than accept a certain loss.
Okay, that is fascinating. So when there's a potential gain, people play it safe. But when there's a potential loss, people suddenly become risk takers.
Precisely. And this is the core insight of what they called prospect theory. The same person can be risk-averse when it comes to gains and risk-seeking when it comes to losses. It's not irrational, it's a systematic pattern in how our brains are built. And once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere.
I feel like I'm already seeing it in my own life. Just thinking about last weekend, I was at a farmer's market and I bought a bag of these fancy organic apples. They cost $7. I got home, tried one, and they were mealy. Just terrible. But did I throw them away? No. I ate them over the next 3 days, miserable every single time, because I couldn't stand the thought of wasting my $7. Meanwhile, I was happy to spend $18 on a nice lunch that same week without a second thought.
That's a perfect example of loss aversion in action. The $7 you already spent, that's what economists call a sunk cost. It's gone. Whether you eat the apples or throw them away, you do not get that $7 back. But your brain treats the decision to throw the apples away as a loss. You've already experienced the financial loss of $7, but your brain is trying to avoid experiencing a second loss, the loss of the apples themselves. And so you endure 3 days of mealy apples to avoid that feeling. And honestly, I think most of us have been there with mealy apples or something very similar.
It's genuinely comforting to hear that this is a brain feature, not a character flaw. But here's what I'm wondering now. Is there an evolutionary reason for this? Why would our brains be wired this way? It doesn't seem very adaptive to be this afraid of loss.
That is exactly the right question. And the evolutionary story is actually quite elegant. Think about our ancestors living in a world of scarcity. For them, losses were not just unpleasant, losses could be lethal. Losing your food source, losing your shelter, losing your status in the group, these things could directly threaten your survival. In that environment, a brain that was extremely sensitive to potential losses had a massive survival advantage. It would motivate you to protect what you had, to avoid risks that could cost you your resources. Meanwhile, gains were nice, but they were not as urgent. Getting an extra berry was a pleasant bonus, but losing your stored food for the winter was a catastrophe. So natural selection favored brains that overweighted losses relative to gains. The ancestors who were loss-averse were the ones who survived.
So my brain is basically still running ancient survival software in a modern world.
That is a perfect way to put it. And the mismatch between that ancient software and our modern environment is at the root of so many of our decision-making struggles. Because in the modern world, most losses are not life-threatening. Losing $50 is annoying. Losing a phone is stressful, but it's not the same as losing your hunting grounds, and yet our brains still react with the same intensity.
So where else does this show up? I'm guessing it goes way beyond mealy apples and lost cash.
Oh, it goes everywhere. Let me give you a few examples from research and from everyday life. One of the most well-studied domains is investing. There's a famous phenomenon called the disposition effect, first documented by behavioral economists Hersh Shifrin and Meir Statman. It describes how investors tend to sell stocks that have gone up in value too early because they want to lock in the gain and feel good. And they hold on to stocks that have gone down in value for too long because selling would mean realizing a loss, and that loss feels so painful that they would rather wait and hope the stock recovers. This is actually a textbook example of loss aversion leading to systematically poor decisions. Investors end up buying high and selling low, the exact opposite of what a rational strategy would suggest.
I have definitely done that. I held on to a stock for 2 years because I couldn't face the fact that I had made a bad decision. And when I finally sold it, it was worth about half of what I paid. And I knew even at the time that holding on to it was probably the wrong move. But selling it felt like admitting defeat.
That's exactly it. And this is the important nuance. Loss aversion is not just about money, it's about ego. It's about identity. Selling that stock at a loss means you have to acknowledge to yourself that you made a mistake. That is a psychological loss. And your brain is trying to protect you from that feeling. The same mechanism shows up in relationships. People stay in unsatisfying relationships or even bad marriages partly because leaving would mean accepting that all the time, energy, and emotion they invested was a sunk cost. That is a loss, and it feels unbearable.
Okay, that one hits close to home. I think everyone has a relationship they stayed in too long for exactly that reason.
And that's the thing, once you understand loss aversion, you start seeing it in so many domains. Think about how you shop. Retailers know that the fear of missing out is a form of loss aversion. Limited time offers, phrases like only 3 left in stock, these trigger a sense of potential loss, and they are incredibly effective. Think about how you negotiate. People will often fight harder to avoid a concession than they will to gain an advantage. In negotiation research, this is called the concession aversion effect. People are more motivated to avoid giving something up than they are to get something new.
I can feel myself getting defensive just thinking about giving something up in a negotiation. And I'm not even negotiating right now. I'm just sitting here on a podcast.
Right, and that is exactly how powerful this bias is. It operates below the level of conscious awareness. You don't think, I am experiencing loss aversion right now. You just feel a strong urge to hold on to what you have, to not let go. And you rationalize it with whatever logic you can find.
Okay, so we've identified the pattern. We've understood the science. But here's the million-dollar question. Can we do anything about it? Or are we just stuck with ancient brains making bad modern decisions?
That is the question, isn't it? And the good news is that awareness itself is powerful. Just knowing about loss aversion can change how you make decisions, because you can learn to recognize when your emotional reaction to a potential loss is out of proportion to the actual stakes. But let me give you a few specific strategies that research support.
Please. I need them.
First, create distance between the emotional impulse and the decision. There's a technique called the 10-10-10 rule, popularized by writer Susie Welch, but it aligns with a lot of cognitive science. Before making a decision driven by fear of loss, ask yourself, how will I feel about this in 10 minutes? In 10 months? In 10 years? This forces your brain to shift from the immediate emotional reaction to a longer perspective. When you're staring at a stock that has lost 30% of its value, the thought of selling it right now feels catastrophic. But if you ask yourself, will this decision matter in 10 years? The answer often becomes clear.
It makes sense. It's like giving the emotional part of your brain time to calm down before the rational part can have a say.
Exactly. And the second strategy is related. It's called reframing. Loss aversion happens because we focus on the loss itself rather than the full picture. When you're deciding whether to leave a relationship or a job, the loss is vivid and immediate. But what about the gains you're missing out on by staying? The opportunity cost. Research by cognitive scientists shows that when people are prompted to explicitly consider what they are sacrificing by staying in a situation, their decisions become more balanced. You can actually reframe a loss as a trade. You are not losing something. You are trading one situation for another that has different benefit.
I love that. It's not a loss. It's a trade. I'm going to use that.
Please do. And the third strategy is what I would call the pre-commitment approach. The best time to make a rational decision about loss is before the loss happens. Set rules in advance. For example, if you're investing, decide ahead of time that you will sell a stock if it drops by 15% no matter what. And then stick to that rule. When the stock drops, your emotional brain will scream at you to hold on. But because you made the decision in advance, the rule can override the emotion.
So it's like making a decision for your future self, knowing that your future self is going to be irrational.
Exactly. You are designing a decision environment that protects you from your own cognitive biases. And honestly, once you start doing this, you might actually feel more compassion for yourself because this isn't a character flaw. It's a brain feature. And once you understand the mechanism, you can work with it instead of against it.
Dr. Ann, we're about to move into our closing segment, but I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. Is there one more thing you want to leave us with? Something really practical that listeners can try today?
Yes, here's something simple but powerful. The next time you find yourself hesitating to make a decision because you're afraid of losing something, ask yourself one question. If I had never had this job, this relationship, this stock, this bag of mealy apples, would I choose it now? If the answer is no, then letting go is not a loss, it's a correction. And understanding loss aversion means you can recognize the feeling of loss for what it really is, an ancient survival signal that is not always accurate in the modern world.
That is genuinely one of the most useful questions I've ever heard. I'm going to try that today.
And before we go, to everyone listening, if you want to learn more about how your brain makes decisions and why sometimes it leads you astray, hit that subscribe button. We do this every single day, one concept at a time, and honestly, understanding loss aversion is one of those insights that changes how you see the world.
It truly does. I have to say, I came into this episode thinking I was just a naturally anxious person who hates losing. And now I realize I'm just a normal human with a brain that evolved 200,000 years ago.
And that is both humbling and I hope a little freeing.
It really is. Thank you, Dr. Ann, for another episode that made me feel seen.
Thank you, Zach. And to everyone listening, here's your takeaway for today. Notice just once today when you make a decision driven more by the fear of losing something than the excitement of gaining something. Notice it, name it, and give yourself a moment. That's loss aversion, and now you know what it is.
Mind Decoded, new episode every day.
See you next time.